When you think of food preservation, your mind likely jumps to refrigerators, freezers, and vacuum sealers. But for the Amish, who intentionally live without modern technology, food storage is a spiritual and practical discipline rooted in tradition, resilience, and divine stewardship. The idea of storing food for decades, up to 20 years in some cases, may seem impossible without electricity. Yet Amish families across North America have quietly mastered this craft for generations. Their secret lies not in cutting-edge science, but in ancient wisdom, hard work, and a deep connection to the land. The Amish way of life is grounded in preparedness. They live close to the rhythms of nature and follow the biblical principle of storing up for the future. Much like Joseph in the book of Genesis, who saved grain for 7 years of famine, the Amish see long-term food storage as both a sacred duty and an expression of love for their families. Most Amish families grow the bulk of their own food: vegetables, fruits, grains, dairy, and meat. Food isn't something casually tossed into a fridge or freezer. It's cleaned, preserved, sealed, and stored with reverence. Root cellars are dug deep into the earth. Glass jars are filled with preserved produce. Meats are salted, smoked, or canned. Even flour, sugar, and beans are packed in containers that can last decades if stored properly. Their approach may not use electricity, but it uses something far more powerful: human diligence. A central part of Amish culture is generational knowledge. Grandparents teach grandchildren how to dry apples, preserve lard, or identify the right temperature and moisture levels for storing potatoes. These are not hobbies, they are survival skills. Amish mothers keep handwritten notebooks filled with family recipes for preserving tomato sauce, storing shelled corn, and fermenting vegetables. Fathers build shelves, barrels, and bins in cool, dark cellars to hold the abundance of summer well into the depths of winter and beyond. Perhaps most remarkably, the Amish don't just store food for months, they aim for years. Some of their home-canned goods, sealed in sterilized mason jars, can remain safe to eat for a decade or more. Dried beans, hard grains like wheat berries, and powdered milk can last 20 years or longer if kept away from moisture and sunlight. It's not magic, it's method. And it works because they trust the land, respect the process, and never take shortcuts. Root cellars, nature's underground refrigerator. One of the most powerful tools the Amish use to store food long-term without electricity is the humble root cellar. These underground storage spaces act as nature's refrigerator, harnessing the earth's stable temperatures to preserve food through every season and, in many cases, for years. Unlike the buzzing modern fridge, a root cellar is silent, dark, and cool, yet astonishingly effective. In fact, for many Amish families, it is the cornerstone of their food security strategy. Root cellars are typically built beneath or adjacent to the home, barn, or food storage shed. They are dug several feet into the earth, lined with stone or concrete, and carefully vented to allow air circulation without letting in excess moisture. The soil itself provides natural insulation, keeping temperatures steady, usually between 32 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of how hot or cold it is above ground. Humidity is managed with proper drainage, ventilation pipes, and sometimes even by placing straw or sawdust on the floors. Within these cellars, food is not simply thrown in. It is arranged with care and purpose. Certain root vegetables like carrots, potatoes, beets, and parsnips are stored in bins of sand or sawdust to prevent moisture loss. Apples are kept on separate shelves to avoid spoiling nearby crops as they release ethylene gas. Canning, sealing food for the next generation. For the Amish, canning is not just a method of food preservation, it is a ritual. It is a tradition passed down through generations, done with meticulous care and often as a family effort. Amish kitchens come alive during the harvest season with the sounds of boiling pots, popping jar lids, and the gentle conversation of women working side by side, carefully preparing food that might not be eaten for years. Canning enables the Amish to store everything from fruits and vegetables to meats and soups, all without the use of electricity or refrigeration, and many of these jars remain viable for a decade or even longer. The process begins with harvesting and selection. Whether it's tomatoes, green beans, apples, peaches, or corn, only the highest quality produce is selected for canning. Amish families know that food intended for long-term storage must be fresh, unblemished, and fully ripe. This isn't just about taste, it's about safety. Once selected, the produce is washed thoroughly and prepared according to time-tested recipes. Some are blanched, others cooked into sauces or jams, and many are packed raw with brine, vinegar, or syrup, depending on the item. The canning jars used are typically glass mason jars, sterilized through boiling and handled with precision. Lids and rings are inspected for dents or rust, and only the best are used. Amish women often keep entire cabinets filled with jars, hundreds of them, ready for the season. Once filled, the jars are sealed using either the water bath method for high-acid foods like fruits and pickles, or the pressure canning method for low-acid foods like meats, beans, and soups. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Amish canning is how long the results last. When stored in a cool, dark place, like a root cellar or basement, properly canned food can last anywhere from 5 to 20 years, depending on the item. The Amish also preserve food for barter or as gifts within the community. A jar of home-canned peaches or sweet corn might be brought to a neighbor after a birth or illness, or traded for items like milk, eggs, or sewing supplies. This creates a communal safety net where abundance is shared and everyone benefits from the labor of harvest. Drying and dehydrating, the power of time and air. In the absence of refrigeration and artificial climate control, one of the oldest and most reliable food preservation techniques used by the Amish is drying. Drying and dehydrating food strips it of its moisture, the very element that bacteria, mold, and rot require to thrive. Through this deceptively simple process, the Amish are able to preserve fruits, vegetables, herbs, and even meat for years. Without electricity, without preservatives, without machines, just time, patience, and an intimate understanding of how nature works. Drying has been a part of Amish food culture since their ancestors lived in Europe. Traditionally, it began with laying produce in the sun or hanging it in well-ventilated attics, barns, or porches. Today, while some more progressive Amish communities may use non-electric solar dehydrators or hand-cranked drying boxes, the principles remain unchanged. Vegetables like corn, peas, carrots, and green beans are blanched briefly, then laid on trays to dry in warm, shaded areas with steady airflow. Fruits like apples, pears, and peaches are sliced thin and hung on strings or placed on screens to dry slowly over several days. Even berries are spread out on cloths and turned regularly to ensure even drying. Once dried, these foods are stored in sealed glass jars, fabric bags, or metal tins, protected from light, air, and pests. Dried apples, a favorite Amish snack, can last up to 10 years if properly kept. Dried beans and lentils can last even longer. One of the most impressive practices among some Amish families is the drying of meat, especially in the form of jerky. Strips of beef or venison are marinated in salt and spices, then hung to dry in smokehouses or curing rooms. These dried meats are not only lightweight and easy to store, but also incredibly shelf-stable, often lasting a decade or more if kept away from moisture. Some Amish communities also dry fish, eggs, or even shredded cabbage, using techniques passed down by word of mouth and through handwritten family journals. Drying is not merely about efficiency, it's about conservation. During the long winter months, these dried goods are rehydrated in soups, stews, or boiled as side dishes. The flavor may be concentrated, but the nutrition is preserved. And there's a quiet pride in knowing that a bowl of rehydrated corn or a slice of dried peach came not from a store or a freezer, but from last summer's harvest and the family's own hands. Smoking and salting, preserving meat the old-fashioned way. Among the Amish, preserving meat without refrigeration is a serious, time-honored craft. Unlike the quick conveniences of modern freezers or vacuum-sealed packaging, the Amish rely on ancient methods, particularly smoking and salting, to ensure that their meat lasts not just for months, but for years. These methods are rooted in survival, stewardship, and simplicity. They allow the Amish to enjoy protein throughout the year, even when livestock butchering is limited to seasonal or communal events. Done properly, a smoked ham or salted pork slab can remain edible for decades. The process usually begins during the colder months, when meat can be processed safely without risk of immediate spoilage. Winter butchering is a tradition in Amish culture. Families gather to slaughter pigs, cows, or chickens, and then process every part of the animal with great care and efficiency. Nothing is wasted. After cutting the meat into manageable sections, the first step in long-term preservation is almost always salting. Large quantities of coarse salt are rubbed directly into the meat, sometimes with the addition of sugar, pepper, cloves, or other spices. The salt draws out moisture, creating an environment hostile to bacteria and decay. The meat is then left to cure for days or even weeks in wooden barrels, stone crocks, or large pans. This cured meat is then hung in smokehouses, simple outdoor structures made of wood with controlled airflow and ventilation. A slow fire is built on the floor using hardwoods like hickory, maple, or apple wood, which not only dry the meat, but also infuse it with a rich, smoky flavor. Smoking can last anywhere from a few days to several weeks, depending on the type and size of meat. Hams, sausages, and bacon are common items for long smoking, while smaller cuts or fish are often smoked more quickly. The result is meat that is dry, dense, flavorful, and highly resistant to spoilage. Some families also preserve fat from slaughtered animals by rendering it into lard, which is then stored in sealed containers. Lard can be kept at room temperature for years if sealed properly, and is used for cooking, baking, and soap making. In addition, the Amish may store preserved meat in sealed mason jars using a pressure canning method that requires no electricity. Meat canned in this way is tender, ready to eat, and remarkably long-lasting, often safe for consumption 10 or even 15 years later if kept cool and undisturbed. In a world where so much meat is wasted due to reliance on refrigeration and constant power, the Amish approach offers a quiet, powerful alternative. Through patience, labor, and ancestral wisdom, they show that preservation is not about machines, it's about knowing your food, respecting your land, and working in harmony with the seasons. Their smoked and salted meats are more than just sustenance. They are a testimony to endurance, gratitude, and the power of simplicity. The Amish show us that without electricity, without modern preservatives, and without waste, we can transform nature's bounty into a lasting source of nourishment. And, perhaps more importantly, they show that doing so connects us, across generations, through seasons, and with deep gratitude, to the earth that provides.